Hey y'all! In this video, we're going to get into what is easily your most requested topic, and that is a stacked text sign. And we're going to put particular emphasis on using layers to keep the artwork and toolpaths organized. And along the way, I'm going to share with you a few little tips to help make the toolpathing and machining process easier, as well as a couple of tips on getting a better, smoother result in these pocket toolpaths out here in these large areas. So, let's go ahead and get into a new session of Aspire, and we're going to create this project from scratch. So the first thing I'll do is I'll want to create a new file, and a lot of these numbers are going to be filled in already because I have obviously done this project before to give you this preview photo. I'm going to base this size on a standard Select Pine 1x12, which is 11.25 inches tall and wide. I'm going to cut a piece of it 18 inches wide, so that will be my width in X, 18 inches, with a nominal thickness of about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to put my Z0 to the material surface, and for this demonstration, I'll set my XY datum to the center of my piece of material. My modeling resolution is going to stay at standard because we don't have any 3D content in this project at all. And I'll click OK. Now, as I said, I'm going to place heavy emphasis on using layers to keep things organized. And this will make sense as we progress. But what we want to do is we want to avoid confusion and avoid duplicate vectors and duplicate artwork. So let's go ahead and start getting some artwork out here. The first vector I want to draw is my profile cutout, my outer border. So we'll come up here to draw a rectangle, and I want to anchor the center of that rectangle on my X0, Y0. And I know that I want a final size of 16 inches wide in X by 10 inches high in Y. I want square corners. I'll go ahead and create that rectangle. This is the outside dimension of my final sign. So now I want to close that. And I want to create a border. And I think a 1/2 inch border all the way around is appropriate for this sign. So I'll go ahead and select that vector, come down to offset, and I'm going to offset it inwards by 1/2 inch. I want to create sharp offset corners. I do not want to delete the original. And I do want to select the new offset vector. I'll click offset, and we've offset our rectangle inward by a 1/2 inch, and I'll close that. Now is when we start getting into layers. I want to keep everything organized. So I'll come up here into my layer manager, and we'll see right now that I have layer 1. That is the default. With this vector still selected, I'll right click it, and I'll move it to layer, new layer, and we'll call this layer inner border. I'll make it visible, but I'm not going to make it active just yet, and we'll click OK. So now when I come up here into my layer manager, I have my inner border, which is just that inside vector right there. Well, now I want to change the name of this layer to outer border. So I'll just It's already selected. It's already highlighted, meaning that's the active layer. I'll click it again, and I'll change the name to Outer Border. Now I need to start working on my text down in here. So I'll want this to be on its own layer. So I'll come up here into my layer manager and I'll select Add New Layer. Now I'm going to make a wedding/anniversary sign. And the top layer, my top text, I want the first names of the couple involved. So I'm going to name this layer First Names, tap Enter, and we see that not only has that layer been created, it is now the active layer. So with our first names layer being active, we want to come down here into our drawing area, and I want to create a rectangle out here to put our first names into. So I'll go ahead and select Draw Rectangle. I do want square corners, and I'm going to bring my cursor out here to the center, my X0, Y0, and I'm going to press and hold down the Alt key on my keyboard. Press and hold that down, then I'm going to click my cursor and drag out, and that creates a rectangle expanding from the center. And I'm going to drag it out to about right, like so. That's about right. Then release both the key and the mouse button. And I want to do a little bit of fine adjustment here. I got my width in X correct. I want that to be about 14 inches. Let's go ahead and round up my height in Y to 2.5 inches. We'll click Apply, and that modified the size of my rectangle from the center because that's how it was drawn to begin with. Now I can close that window, and now with this rectangle selected, I want to create my first name text. So with it selected, I'll come up here to Draw Text within a vector box. Click that, let my fonts load. Now, I've had several questions messaged and sent to me about combinations of fonts that work well with stacked text. And my answer to that is going to be whatever you like. I cannot make that decision for you. You have to make that decision yourself. Some fonts work better together than others, but it's going to be trial and error on your part to see what combinations appeal to you. Personally, I like to use Brush Script MT for this type of a design because I have fewer issues with this font than I do with other script fonts. So let's go ahead up here into our text box and let's enter the names here. We have my name and the ampersand and my wife's name. Now, when we look here at the text, we can see that there's a large space here between the left edge of this character and our box. And the same thing with the right edge of our character and this edge of the box. Now I have my text aligned to the center, and I have a margin size down here that is normal. It's giving me a standard margin from this edge of the box to the characters all the way around. If I shift over here and I click None, the text now better fills the box. And I think I prefer that. It makes that stand out a little bit more. So that's the way I'm going to leave it. So with that done, I'll go ahead and I'll close that. and I have my first names on my first names layer. Now we'll do a little bit of cleanup. We no longer need this rectangle vector. So in order to avoid confusion, I'll select that vector and just tap delete on my keyboard and get rid of it. The software will remember this bounding box that we just deleted. Now we need to create the last name. So I'll come up here to my layer manager, add a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer last name. Tap enter, and it's made that layer active. I can turn off first names for just a moment here and come back down into our drawing area. I'll do the same thing with the last name. I want to create a rectangle. I'm going to come over here into my center, hold down the Alt key, and drag a rectangle. I want to make it larger than the previous. And I'm going to round this off. I'll make it 14 inches wide in X and 5 inches high in Y. I'll click Apply, and it made those adjustments based on the center of the rectangle. Then I can close it, and just like we did with the first names, I'm going to come up here to draw text. Now I want to use a different font for this because I want a little bit of contrast. So one of my little preferences, I like the Ackland font. There are a couple of others that work well with this, but I prefer a script font for the first names and then a blockier font for the last name. A body works well, Britannic works well, but I kind of like Ackland. It just looks a little bit classier. So I'll select that font. Now for the last name, I want all capital letters. So I'll come up here and click into my text box, tap caps lock, and type my last name. Now here I do want to stretch these letters up. It's already sized width-wise, but that looks a little small for this size of material. So I'm going to go ahead and go with a no margin size, and I'm going to stretch the characters to fit within this bounding box. And I'll click Close, click off, and the same as with the first names, I'll select my bounding box vector and delete it to avoid confusion. So now I have first names up here, last name, and here is what this is going to look like. So now I want to add a V-carved date down below here. I'm going to go ahead and shut off my top text just so I'm not, or my first names rather. But I'm going to keep this up so I can use these vectors to size a rectangle. I'm going to come up here and draw a rectangle. And I'm going to put my cursor right over this bottom corner of the letter L and hold it there for a second to kind of wake up the point on this corner and use smart snapping to my advantage. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit here and then click and drag my rectangle. But then I'm going to bring my cursor up to this point, which is the widest point of my last name. Hover the cursor and let it kind of wake up. Then drag it down. And do you see that guideline right there? That guideline will help me place this rectangle to size it. Now I'll release my cursor key, and I've sized my rectangle to the same width as my text. Now I'm going to come over here. It is the same width in X, 14 inches wide. I'm going to round that up to 1.5 and click Apply. Then close that. Now I can zoom in here and just using my cursor keys, I'm going to look at the gap between the bottom and this vector here, and the bottom and these vectors up here. And I think I'm going to bump it up I'm going to press the cursor up key one time, and I think that looks a little bit more even. I'm just eyeballing it here. It doesn't have to be 100% precise. So with our bounding box created, I can now, again, come up to draw text. And this is going to be V-carved. It's not going to be left standing proud. It's not going to be a part of the Pocket toolpath. So I'll select my font. I'm going to use the same brush script that I used for the first names. And I'll come up here and click in my text box, and I'll enter my date. March 4th, 1988 is our anniversary date. That's how I'm going to leave it. No vertical stretch. Margin size is fine. I'm going to leave this be, just like that, and I'll close it. Now the same as the rest of them, I'm going to delete that bounding box, and as I said before, the software will remember all of these positions. Now I'll select the date text, and I want to move this to its own layer. So with it selected, I'll right-click, move to Layer, New Layer, and I'm going to call this layer Bottom V-carve Text. I'm naming it Bottom V-carve Text to differentiate it from the bottom text, which will be this here, and to let me know that this is the text that's going to be at the bottom of the project. This could be the date, this could be a slogan, it could be anything. But I don't want to call it dates, because that's what I'm going to call the actual layer that I'll be using to calculate the toolpath. So we'll go ahead and we'll click OK. So now if I come up here and I turn on all of my layers, I now have all of the artwork that I need to start creating the actual layers I'm going to use to calculate toolpaths, because there's a lot of modification we still need to do. So I'm going to start with the top text, the text I'm going to leave standing proud, the same as the surface of the material. So what I'll do is I'll select that text, I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to copy to Layer, New Layer. And I'm going to name that layer Top Text. I want to make the new layer visible. I'll click OK. So now when I come up here into my layer manager, I have first names and I have top text. Well, right now I want to turn off first names. I want to turn off last names. I want to make the top text my active layer and shut off the bottom VCarve text, so that I'm working with this text right here. I'll select that, and what I'm going to need to do is weld this together so that it's one seamless closed vector and not separate closed vectors as a text object. So with it selected, I'll come straight over here to Weld, click that icon, and we get this message here. Some objects, such as text, like this, or distorted objects, are converted to curves for this operation. That's what we want to do. Would you like to replace or keep the original objects? There may be some times where you would want to keep this on the same layer, but for stacked text, you don't. You want to replace this text object with those curves that this is going to create. So in this case, I want to click Replace. that deleted that text object and welded these together. Now with them still selected, I want to come over here and I want to group those vectors. So there is my top text. Now I want to do the same thing with the bottom text. But before I do, I want to right-click my top text, copy to layer, new layer, and I'll call this bottom text. Make the new layer visible, click OK. I'll explain the reason for doing this in just a moment. So now I want to come up here to my layer manager. I want to select bottom text, make it visible, and I want to turn on last name. Click off, select my last name, right click, copy to layer, bottom text. Let me go back up here into my layer manager. Now I want to turn off last name. I want to turn off top text. So all I have visible right now are my outer border, my inner border, and my bottom text. Now I know this sounds confusing, but we have to make sure that bottom text is the only layer with any text on it that is turned on. So we'll click off. I want to select all of this because I'm going to now weld it together to create that base that not only has my last name on it, but the base of my top text. If I don't do this, I'll carve my top text and everything will look nice. But when I carve my bottom text, it will machine away the base out here, removing all of the text along with it. So, with all of this selected, I'll come over here, weld. I want to replace the original objects, and there is my welded text. While it's all still selected, I want to group those selected objects, and now we can see that there is the base of this A, the top of this L, the top of my M, and everything in between. So now, if I click off and turn on my top text, there are the necessary vectors needed to machine the top text and the bottom text. Now, let's go ahead and create our VCarve vectors down below. And this is rather simple. What we'll do is we'll add a new layer, and we'll name that layer VCarve. In this case, I'll call it gate, because that's what I'm going to be using this layer for. I'll tap enter. Then I will turn off my top text, turn off my bottom text, then turn on my bottom VCarve text. Click, select, copy to layer, VCarve date. Then come back up and turn off the bottom VCarve text. Now, all I need to do with this layer is weld these letters together. So, select the text, weld them, replace, then group. And we have smooth transitions in all of these letters that are connected. We turn them all on here. This is all of the artwork and all of the vectors we need to create this project. We're ready to start calculating toolpaths. I'm going to leave first name, last name, and bottom VCarve text turned off. The only reason these are on separate layers is when I go to create a template file. That's when we will use these. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But for the rest of this video, these 3 layers will be left turned off. I want top text, bottom text, VCarve date turned on, along with my outer and inner borders. So, we're now ready to go over and start calculating toolpaths. So, we'll go over to the Toolpath tab. Now, over here in the Toolpath tab, the overwhelming majority of this project is going to be done using pocket toolpaths. And normally at this stage of the game, what I would do would be select vectors that we're going to use to create that pocket toolpath, then calculate the toolpath and preview it. But I'm going to show you a different method that will help you to make creating and using a template much easier. This is the perfect project to create a template file for later use. If you create a template file using this geometry, the next time you go to create a similar project, all you'll have to do is change names, change dates, then recalculate toolpaths and save G-code. But more on that later. Right now what we want to do is create the pocket toolpaths needed to cut our text here. So I'll go into Pocket Toolpath. Another little pointer here. I sized this using a standard 1x12 piece of select pine from the big box store. If you have ever machined anything or carved anything in a single wide piece of material like this, you know that you introduce cupping, curling, bowing, and twisting. And the reasons for that are many. There are stresses in the wood, and that's just because wood is a natural product. The simple fact of the matter is wood moves, and it moves for a number of reasons. When you machine away a large area of a piece of wood, you have now changed the stresses in that material. Add heat and humidity changes, and when the wood moves, the thinner portions of the material that we leave behind when we machine it are going to expand and contract at a different rate from the pieces that we did not machine. This is where you get into warping, cupping, bowing, twisting. So I find that by removing as little material as possible, I can minimize that. It doesn't always work 100%, but it does help. So on a piece of material with a nominal thickness of 3/4 of an inch, I try to remove somewhere around 1/8 of an inch. I try to remove less than 1/4 of an inch if I can. So what I'm going to do is use those guidelines to help me determine my cut depth. So my cut depth for this top text is going to be 0.08 of an inch. The cut depth on both of my pocket toolpaths is going to be 0.08, so that I end up removing a total of 0.16 from this material. So, with my cut depth set to 0.08, I'm going to come down here to the tools I'm going to use for this pocket toolpath. Now, Vectric has changed the way their pocket toolpath is used. It used to be you could select one bit and then select another bit as a large area clearance tool. Well, they've changed that to where now you can put as many tools in here as you want. And what the software will do is it'll take the largest bit you use, in this case a 1/4 inch end mill, and it will use that to calculate the strategy, be it offset or raster, and it will calculate everything that 1/4 inch bit can get into. Then when I add a tool like this 1/8 inch end mill, it will remember what this 1/4 inch end mill could remove and only apply the 1/8 inch end mill to what has not yet been cut. And that 1/8 inch end mill will come in here and get the areas that the 1/4 inch end mill could not reach. But it won't bother coming out here and doing this that's already been done. Same with my 1/16 of an inch end mill that I'm going to use as a final end mill. It will only get in and do the small areas that the 1/8 inch end mill can't get in and reach. Now, if you have ever pocketed out large areas using multiple bits, you have undoubtedly come up with machining marks in the bottom of the pocket, where it looks like each of the bits are cutting to different depths. That's a common issue. And the reasons for that are many, depending upon how you set your Z0 after a tool change. But bit deflection and the flex in your machine are also a couple of factors. But there is a way we can minimize that, and that is to adjust the number of passes so that the material is cleared out, leaving a thin skin for a second pass to come up and clean up. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I've got my 3 bits. I've got a 1/4 inch end mill, my 1/8 inch end mill, and my 1/16 inch end mill. I've got my 1/4 inch end mill selected. I'm going to come down here to edit passes. Click that. And we see here right now it's going to make 1 pass to 80 thousandths of an inch deep. What I want to do is I want to set a last pass thickness of 20 thousandths, so 0.02. Then when I click apply, it adds a second pass. The first pass is going to cut down to 0.06 of an inch. Then the second pass is going to cut down to that 0.8 cut depth, removing that last 20 thousandths of an inch. That will reduce bit deflection and machine flex. 20 thousandths of an inch is not much material, but it's enough to clean up these machining marks out here. So I've got my last pass thickness set at 20 thousandths of an inch. I clicked apply, and now I'll select OK. And we see now that for this bit, I have 2 passes, where there used to be 1. Now I'll do the same for my 1/8 inch bit. I have 1 pass. I want to edit the passes. I want to set a last pass thickness of 0.02. I'll click apply, then click OK. Now I have 2 passes for that bit. I'll select my 1/16 of an inch end mill. There are 2 passes there. I want to edit that. I want to set a last pass thickness of 20 thousandths of an inch. Click apply. Click OK. Now all 3 of these bits will clear away the majority of the material on the first 1 or 2 passes, but that final pass is going to just shave that last little skin off. This should reduce any influence of bit deflection or flex in my machine. Now, as I mentioned before, the software uses the largest end mill, the first end mill in line up here at the top, to set your cutting strategy. In this case, I want to go with a raster cutting strategy. I'm going to use a raster angle of 0 this time. I'm not going to concern myself with ramping and plunge moves. Now, we get down here into this area, vector selection. By default, it is set to manual. And this is the time where we would select our vectors out here for carving, because it doesn't know what it wants us to pocket out right now. I'm going to show you how to associate layers with the toolpath, which will make calculation easier after we've created this template file. So to do that, we'll come over here and we'll use the vector selector. I'll click Selector. And now it's asking over here what type of vectors we want to select. We want to select closed vectors, all closed vectors. Now over here, we want to select the vectors we're going to machine to. Already checked is my inner border. This is the list of the layers that we created over here. I've got my inner border checked, and I have top text checked. These were checked because, as I said, I've already created this pattern to show you this demo over here. I want to use the inner border layer, and I want to use the top text layer. What is crucial is to put a check mark over here, associate with Toolpath. This is critical. Now I can close this. And we see here now, vector selection has changed to automatic. And our inner border and our top text is selected. Now I can change the name to top text, and I'll calculate the toolpath. And as we can see, it has created 3 separate toolpaths here. A toolpath for the 1/4 inch bit, a toolpath for the 1/8 inch bit, and a toolpath for the 1/16 inch bit. Now I'll go ahead and undraw each of these, and we'll go through them one by one. This top toolpath using the 1/4 inch bit is going to machine away the bulk of the material out here and get into our text as far as it can. We'll undraw that, and we'll look at our 1/8 inch bit, and now we see here why it won't let us decide whether we want to raster or go with offset, because this bit is only going to carve away the little areas that the 1/4 inch bit can't reach. It's not actually doing any clearance out here. A little bit in the corners, but it's not doing any movements out here. So the software will decide whether it needs to raster or offset to clear out these little areas. And the same holds true with our 1/16 of an inch bit. It's basically going to do a profile pass around our text and get any little spots that the 1/8 inch bit won't fit into. Let's go ahead and let's change these colors. And because I have so many different levels, the color scheme I'm using here is not necessarily the one I would use for the project. It's just simply to provide enough contrast so that you can see the different levels. So let's go with a toolpath color of, let's go with an 80% gray. And let's make this also 80% gray. And we'll make this one also 80% gray. And now we can preview these toolpaths one by one. So we'll preview our 1/4 inch clearance pass. And again, it will do this in 2 passes, machining away the bulk of the material. Then come back and remove that 20,000ths of an inch skin. And there's everything that the 1/4 inch bit would remove. So now we'll preview our 1/8 inch toolpath. And you can see it just got into the areas the 1/4 inch couldn't reach. And now we'll use our final bit, the 1/16 of an inch end mill. And that cleared away the rest of it. So we can close our preview, go back over to our 2D view, and click off to deselect everything. Now we want to create another pocket toolpath for our bottom text. So we'll click on Pocket Toolpath. Now, we're going to be machining this area out again, but remember, we've already carved down 0.08. So I need to change my start depth to reflect that. My start depth will also be 0.08. So I want this toolpath to start at the level that we just machined to. Then cut down another 0.08. Now we need to remember these two numbers here. 0.08 and 0.08 is 0.16. So we need to remember that, and that'll come in handy in just a minute. Again, I'm going to use the same bits. The 1/4 inch end mill, the 1/8 inch end mill, and the 1/16 inch end mill. But again, I'm going to edit my passes. So I'll select my 1/4 inch end mill, edit passes, set last pass thickness, 0.02, click apply, OK. Again, 1/8 inch, same thing. Set last pass thickness, 0.02, apply, OK. 1/16 inch end mill, edit passes, last pass thickness, 0.02, apply, OK. Come back up here and select my 1/4 inch end mill, make sure I have raster selected, 0 degree raster angle. Now we'll come down to vector selection. Again, we'll use the selector. We want to select the closed vectors, all closed vectors. On the selected layers, inner border, yes. And I don't want top text, I want bottom text. So you can see out here it's selected the inner border and my bottom text. Critical again, associate with toolpath. Close. And now I can name this bottom text. And we can calculate this toolpath. Now, it's created the 3 pocket toolpaths. I want to make this a lighter shade of gray so you can see the contrast. You can see the different levels. So I'll make this, let's go with 40% gray. I'll undraw them. We'll select our bottom text clearance using the 1/4 inch bit, and we'll preview that toolpath. And that is the amount of this the 1/4 inch bit can reach. Now we'll use the 1/8 inch bit. We'll preview that. Then we'll come in with the 1/16 inch bit. We'll preview that. And there we go. These areas out here that I were concerned with the sharp corners, that's taken care of. This corner is inside the M, so we don't see it. Now we do have these little areas here where that 1/16 of an inch bit couldn't reach. This is just my opinion here. I take care of that in the paint process. I will paint this area here the same color as my background. So, we've got that taken care of. Now we need to V-carve our date down here. So, we'll close, come back to the 2D view, click off to deselect everything, and I want to do a V-carve toolpath. So, select the V-carve toolpath. Now, if you recall, over here, we machined down 0.08 to get to this level. Then we just machined down another 0.08 to get to this level. So I want my start depth to be this level right here. And if I look at my readouts down here, I can see that that level is negative 0.16. So we want our start depth to be 0.16. That's where it's going to start carving, right here on this surface. I'm not going to use a flat depth. My tool, I'm going to use my go-to, which is a 90-degree V-bit. I don't think that this text is big enough to need a clearance tool, so I'm not going to use a clearance tool. And again, I'm going to come down here, vector selection. I want to select all closed vectors on these layers. I don't want the inner border. I don't want bottom text. I just want it to VCarve the date. That's all. Again, critical to associate it with the toolpath and close. We've changed over to automatic. So let's call this toolpath VCarve date. We'll calculate the toolpath. And I'll change the color of this one to black just to make it easy to see. And we'll preview this toolpath. There we go. Now we only have one more toolpath to create. So we'll close our preview, go back over to the 2D view, click off to deselect everything. And now I want to do my profile cutout. So I'll do a profile toolpath. My start depth will be 0. I want to start at the surface of the material. And I want to cut all the way through the material. So I'll highlight everything in my cut depth and type in Z plus 0.005 so that it goes that much deeper than the thickness of my material. Then I'll tap the equals button. For a tool, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I don't need to edit the passes for this because it's cutting all the way through. I want to cut to the outside of the vectors. I will do a separate last pass with an allowance of 0.01. If I were going to take this outside and cut it right now, I would add tabs. I am not going to add tabs for this demonstration so that I can double click to get rid of the material. I would add smooth ramps over a distance of 1 inch. And I want to make sure I have sharp external corners here. Come down here to vector selection and again, click my selector, closed vectors on this layer, outer border, and uncheck everything else. Associate with toolpath, close. And now I can name this Cutout, calculate it. I get the warning that it's going to cut through the material. Okay. And I don't need to assign a toolpath color to this one. Preview. Double click to get rid of the waste. And now there's our project. If I want, I can come up here and change my material color to black just to give you some nice contrast so that you can see the different levels. We have machined in 0.08 of an inch to this level. Then we machined in a further 0.08 to this level. Then we V-carved at this level, allowing this text to stand proud of this text, which stands proud of the base. It all comes down to using layers, keeping those layers separate, knowing which layer you want to turn on and turn off while you're doing your artwork out here. Leaving the first name layer, the last name layer, and the bottom VCarve text layer turned off while we're going through the machining process. Using these layers only. These layers are necessary when we come in, create a template file, then use that template file to create another sign with different names and dates. On that subject, let's go ahead and go into our 2D view, click off to deselect everything. I'll turn all of my layers back on. Then I'll come up here to File, and I want to save this as a template. So I'll click Save as Template. I already have one in here. I'm going to replace this one. So I will call this Wedding dash anniversary. Wow, I can't spell today. Wedding dash anniversary sign. I'll save it. Yes, it already exists. I do want to replace it. Now I have a template file created. If I come down here into the folder, there is the template file. Should I get an order for this sign, I can open up that template, change the names, change the date, recalculate the toolpaths, then save G-code and take it outside. But that's a subject for the next video. In the next video, we'll do just that. We'll open up the template, we'll change the fonts, we'll change the names, we'll change the dates, and make a few more modifications. So I hope you got something out of this video. The main takeaway for this, it's keeping your artwork separate, keeping it organized, so that it's easier to associate a toolpath with these layers. This takes a lot of setup, as you just saw, for your first design. As you'll see in the next video, after this, it all becomes easy. You only have to change names, dates, recalculate toolpaths, and go. But as I said, that's for another video. So again, I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, I do hope you'll give me a thumbs up. As usual, later on today, at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session where we can discuss anything that I have demonstrated in this video. Again, that's today at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel. And I've put a link to that live Q&A down in the description box of this video. Now, these live Q&A sessions are a great reason to go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. And when you click that little red subscribe button, click that little bell icon right next to it. Then click it one more time and set that to all notifications. Then you'll get a notification the next time I post a video and the next time I go live. So I hope to see you this afternoon for the live Q&A session. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.